Hello, everybody. Chad Eves, and today we're going to talk about how to make a good podcast with 5 tips to make your podcast potentially better than what it might be today, or to get off on the right foot if you're thinking of starting out with a new one. Before we dive into this, a quick reminder about Executive Communication Brief. This is our weekly coaching podcast that we're doing where we dive into different strategies, theories, practices, trend analysis that is really aimed at people in leadership roles, executives, owners, and also people that want to get into those type of roles. So that's Executive Communication Brief, available exclusively on Apple Podcast. So let's talk about making a better podcast. And the reason why I'm doing this topic here today is because I recently listened to a friend's podcast and it saddened me. The person's a good friend of mine, and the podcast was hard to listen to. I hung in there because I want to talk about the topic with the person, but it was almost physically painful to really hang in there and keep with it. Now, when we create a podcast, there are 2 factors that can work against us. The first one is just the sheer volume of competition in the podcast landscape. Estimates on the number of podcast shows out there range from 2 to more than 5 million different shows on the planet. And these generate tens of millions of episodes. So this is why it's so important that when we get listeners that we hold on to them, which introduces the second and most important factor when it comes to us producing a podcast. We want to keep them engaged. We want to keep them listening, and we don't want to drive them away. A lot of that is going to be dependent on the audio production quality. Many podcasts are not so good. Some of them have problems that include constant whining noises, buzzing in the background, rambling hosts with no structure of what they're trying to say, or even unclear audio recordings to where you can't understand the host and any guests that they might have. There are other issues too. That list keeps on going on. But the fixes are pretty simple. They require a little investment and a decent amount of learning, but it's worth it when it comes to creating a podcast. And it can have a bigger payoff than making a video. Now, these two are very different, videos and a podcast. When we watch a video, our brains are able to fill in the blanks and the gaps in what we're watching. If the audio is out of sync a little bit, we can compensate for that. If the image is fuzzy or maybe broken up, our brain can fill in the pieces. But audio is less forgiving. There are no other cues to work off of. With a video, you have that image. In audio podcast, you don't. And so our brains are hard pressed to fill in those gaps and to piece together what we're supposed to be hearing. Poor audio quality, it can lead to people ditching your podcast, and it can actually even make people physically ill. So here are 5 tips that you should consider if you're making a podcast or if you're getting ready to do so. Before you dive into those, you need to consider getting a decently powered computer. Now, this is even more important if you think you might do video at some point as well, because that requires even more power. But you need something that's going to do the job and not keep you waiting all the time. I use Macs. You'll get the best result if you use a MacBook Pro or something equivalent on the Windows side. So keep that in mind if you're at a point where you're getting a new computer or you have the ability to get a new one. Tip number 1 is get a good microphone. People tend to go for a more expensive camera over the microphone when they get into web broadcasting, and that's backwards. You can create a great video with your laptop camera or a decent external camera that can cost you less than $100. And at a minimum, look at the Blue Yeti microphone. They go for around $100. They can be a little bit more depending on the model, or there's even refurbished versions available on Amazon that can be a little bit less expensive. Stay away from the Blue Snowball. It's less expensive, but in my opinion, it's not a very good microphone. I have Blue Yetis. I use them when I travel. I have travel cases for them. They're a good solid microphone. But what I use for my show, and what I'm using right now, is a Shure MV7 microphone. It's pretty popular. You'll see it on a lot of different professional podcasts and on web videos. You can get into one from the low to mid 200s. Now you'll also need a stand, and I use an adjustable arm that's mounted to my desk. Whenever you do recording with a microphone, use headphones to prevent any kind of feedback or distractions or other audio offenses. Are there more expensive microphones out there? Yes, there are. Absolutely. Most of us will not need those. So at least look at the Blue Yeti, consider the Shure MV7. Tip number 2 is consider a pop filter. Now, not everyone needs them. Listen for the way that you talk and the way that you end different words and sounds. It cuts off the sharp ways that we say pop or P's, T's, B's, stuff like that. And it's a screen that is literally mounted in front of your microphone. They start for around $15. Now, if you don't use a pop filter, consider getting a foam windscreen cover for your microphone. That's also a good idea. I have both of those. Tip number 3 is pick a software and get proficient at it. Now, this doesn't mean you have to master everything that it does. Many software titles come with podcast settings that can make it a little easier to use for your recording. I use Adobe Audition. Now, this is a professional software. It has lots of features, which means there's more to learn, but it pays off. It's very good at getting rid of background noises, hums, and other problems that could happen with your audio recording, even using all the equipment we just discussed. It's offered by Adobe for a subscription of about $20 a month. There are a lot of tutorial videos on YouTube on how to use it. Another option is Audacity. Now, on both Audition and Audacity, you can record and edit your audio. Audacity is open source. You can download it online and it's free. Not really my cup of tea. I didn't like the way it works, but it is free and it is popular. Another option is GarageBand. If you use an Apple device, a Mac, an iPhone, an iPad, you can use this to record and edit your audio files, and it's included with Apple products, no additional price. We're going to talk about one that's a little different in OBS software next. This is a video recording software, but you can export your audio. One of the advantages that I found with it is you can record other audio inputs on your computer with it. So for example, if there is a clip that you want to record and comment on, you can do this using OBS Studio. There's some settings that you have to do, but also be aware of copyright issues whenever you do that. And also remember, it's not an editing tool, it's just a recording tool. Tip number 4 is write an outline. At least do a quick sketch of what you're going to talk about in the order that you're going to do this. Add notes. As you do this, it's going to help you remember what you're going to say and build confidence. I use a software called Simple Mind. It's a mind mapping software out of Europe, and it's a way to visually organize your thoughts and order them. I use it for everything from planning my podcasts, creating presentations, and even writing books. So if you're more of a visual person, consider checking that out. It starts for around $33. Another option is your favorite word processor or text app. Microsoft Word, Apple Pages, whatever it might be. Jot down your thoughts, use bullets or numbers, to organize them in the right order that you want to talk about it. Same thing, it's going to help you understand what you're going to say and help with confidence in what you're going to do. The 5th tip is practice. Now, as you gain experience and confidence, the amount that you'll need to practice will vary, but it's almost always a good idea to do a run through, to do a rehearsal. It's a great way to catch errors and mistakes in your thought process and your material. You're not aiming for perfection. It's important to remember that. You want to display confidence and competence in what you do. Minimize stumbling, unintended pauses, and using fillers like and ah. Experiment with these 5 suggestions. See what works for you to produce a great podcast. Get rid of all those distracting sounds, the buzzing, the whining. Stop sounding like you're some kind of a verbal hurricane that's completely disorganized in the message that you're trying to share. And you're going to make huge strides towards keeping people engaged in your show. Producing a good quality podcast can open up a lot of different doors for you. Quick side note. There are probably a large number of you wondering about using your smartphone or tablet to record and edit a podcast. Yes, you can do this. If you're using an Apple iPhone or an iPad or an Android, there are software options out there. For the Apple devices, it's GarageBand. I like using a laptop just because of the bigger screen and the keyboard interface. But if a mobile device is the resource that you have, or it's what's handy, go with it. Still use headsets or earbuds, AirPods, whatever they might be. You can use an external microphone if you like. It gets a little bit more complicated, but it can be done. So experiment with these 5 tips. Look at the resources that you have, and it'll be a huge step into creating a podcast with better audio quality. You're going to keep those people engaged, and you're not going to drive them away, and it'll be a much more pleasurable experience for your audience and a beneficial one for you as the podcast creator. I hope this helps provide a little bit of insight, maybe tweak stuff up a little bit. Also keep in mind our podcast executive communication brief. If that's a path for you, you can check that out on Apple Podcasts, and I will see you next time.